most of the time, being home alone is awesome. Until, of course, you hear a noise that sends you into a deep panic, convincing you that you are about to be the next victim in a Scream movie. Welcome back, everyone. My name is Kennedy, and today we are counting down some of Reddit's most terrifying stories about being home alone. So lock your doors and check your windows, because these are the top 10 terrifying home alone stories not for the faint-hearted. Starting us off at number 10, robbers. So starting us off, we have a story from user JL Craverso about a time when they were home alone at the age of 10 that scarred them so much they couldn't stay home alone for weeks afterward. Quote, "I was in the basement playing computer games, probably RuneScape, and heard someone pull into the driveway. Naturally, I assumed it was my mother who was coming home from work. I heard the screen door open, but when no one opened the lock on the actual door, I thought I'd go upstairs to see what was going on. It was then when I saw a pair of legs walk by the basement window, which was situated about a foot above the ground. I went upstairs and saw two dudes in my backyard looking at the windows and talking about how the door was locked. It was an attempted home robbery, and even though everything locked, 10-year-old me was terrified. Honestly, adult me would be terrified too." Coming in at number 9, a stalker. If I ever need yet another reason to avoid living by myself in an isolated cabin, then this story from Reddit user Shatterly will be the one I think of. Quote, "I spent 6 months living alone in a cabin near the end of a dirt road in central New Hampshire. Nearest neighbors were a quarter mile or so up or down the road. It's an area where people definitely keep to themselves. Had all sorts of animal visitors, bears on the porch, you name it, but never random people around. One morning, I went out to my car to go to work. It was spring and we'd had a late frost. On the rear window of my truck, someone had written, 'I watch you,' with their finger in the frost. I never had an actual problem in the rest of my time there, but that freaked me out." Coming in at number 8, an emergency. Warning for those of you that are not a fan of a bit of gore, this one might not be for you. User overly_Cloverly took to Reddit to share about the scariest time they had ever been home alone, and it is gnarly. Now, to be fair, this is kind of a stretch because they weren't alone, but it's terrifying enough that I think it warrants a spot on the list. Quote, "I was 9 years old, my sister was 6. We had a babysitter who was 12, so we were alone in the sense that no adults were around. Jackass that I was, I squirted bug spray on my sister and she chased me in retaliation. I ran through some French glass doors to get away from her. She went for the knob and missed. Her arm went through one of the glass panes. She cut herself so deep you could see muscle, tendons, and bone. It looked like a badly cut piece of raw meat, since that's basically what it was. The babysitter held a piece of cloth on my sister's arm until my mom came home and took my sister to the ER. She didn't hit an artery, so it wasn't as bad as it could have been, but it was scary as F at the time." Now, as scary as this would have been for the Reddit user and his sister, I just keep thinking about that poor babysitter. The poor thing was only 12 and was probably scarred for life. Coming in at number 7, man in the window. Next up, we have a story from user Not a Sugar Baby But Okay, and they start off by explaining that the street they live on is really old and very picturesque, so it often attracts lots of tourists. In fact, quote, "There have been more than a few times where I've come upstairs from the garden level, kitchen/living room, to the street level, first floor, to find that if I haven't closed the curtains, tourists will be peeking in, trying to see what the interior looks like. It's annoying and kinda creepy, but I'm used to it." So their creepy home alone story happened one night after they came upstairs to go to bed to find some guy standing in front of their window. In usual circumstances, this might be weirder, but as we covered, this apparently happened all the time. What happened next was not so common. Quote, "I closed one side because screw it, I don't care if you want to see our upstairs living room, I'm tired. I went to do the other and he just gave me this furious look, like his face just twisted into so much anger that it stopped me in my tracks. We stared each other down for a few moments before he gave me this big, creepy, leering smile and walked slowly down the street. I think I woke up and checked our deadbolt and chain like 8 times throughout the course of that night." Coming in at number 6, MSN Chat. Our next terrifying story is brought to us by Reddit user The Haunted Butterfly, and is just another example of how creepy it can get on the internet. Quote, one night when I was about 12 or 13, my parents were gone for a while and I was just staying up really late on my desktop computer waiting for them to come home. Like most people, I'd been told a million times not to talk to strangers on the internet, but about half my friends list on MSN were people I had never met before, so I was just chatting with a bunch of them. Reddit friend then explains that out of nowhere, one of their online friends sent them a detailed message of exactly what they had been up to for the last hour, including what they'd eaten and when they had last gotten up to leave. As anyone would in that situation, the Reddit user instantly got a horrible feeling in the pit of their stomach and jumped to the conclusion that this person, who was supposed to live in another country, had found out where they lived and was watching them through the window. But that wasn't quite it. Quote, turns out he had somehow hacked into my webcam and had been frequently watching me through it whenever he wanted. It's been 10 years and I still have all the cameras on my devices covered in thick duct tape. Next up at number 5, an unexpected visit. Next up is a story from user Bodhazatfa, and they start off by explaining that this happened when they were in the 4th grade, and that their parents used to let them walk home from school by themselves. Quote, I get home and begin to pass the time before my parents get home at 5. So I'm doing my usual routine, Mountain Dew, Doritos, and Toonami on Cartoon Network. After about 3 minutes, I hear a knock at the door. 99% of the time, I stay quiet and just wait for whoever it is to leave, but for some reason, I actually go to the door and call out, who is it? A stranger replies, hey, it's your buddy Mike. Reddit friend goes on to explain that they do not have a buddy named Mike, nor did they even know anybody named Mike, and so they immediately became terrified. The story continues, quote, dude says again, hey, open the door, we gotta go, and then he jiggles the door handle really hard. Then he knocks again, bam, 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 and turns the door handle again. I'm still close to the door and haven't moved because I didn't want him to hear my footsteps. After a minute of silence, I heard a car door close and him drive away. Even then, I still freaked the F out for the next hour because I realized he obviously followed me home that day and I had no idea I was being tailed. Coming in at number 4, an unfriendly neighbor. In my experience, neighbors are either amazing, pie-bringing angels, or the worst humans alive. And sadly for our Reddit friend Invisible Bookend, this neighbor is in the second category. They begin by saying that they lived in a very remote house, kind of in the middle of nowhere, and one night, quote, I was home alone, cleaning my room, and singing We Are the Champions extremely loudly. I looked up and suddenly see a man power walking up my driveway, very quickly. It's obvious no one is home but me since there aren't any cars in the driveway, so I ran to the front door, locked it and closed, and locked my window. Turns out, Brofriend did not like that. I called 911 because he was still approaching my house and I was getting scared. While on the phone with the 911 operator, he started banging on my front window by the door and then the door itself. He then tried kicking in the door and breaking the window. I went and hid in my mom's closet with a knife until the cops showed up. By the time they got there, the man was gone. They found him about an hour later walking up and down the street. He told them that he heard my pretty singing voice and just wanted to say hi. He also told them he planned to come in and have some fun with me after he found out that I was home alone and that he was waiting to come back after dark. Thank God he never got inside that house. Coming in at number 3, Man on the Run. This next story comes from Reddit user NotAVegan90, and honestly, if this happened to me, I would probably be moving just in case this man ever returned. Quote, I was chilling in my friend's apartment alone. We lived in a duplex. He was on the top floor and I was on the bottom. I was playing some Xbox when I hear something huge come through the front door into the kitchen, so I got up to see who was there. We threw huge parties all the time, so it wasn't really that odd for some random to just show up, but then I saw this guy, a huge hulking country boy in overalls with a huge kitchen knife just looking at me standing in the kitchen. I might have said something, but I promptly noped the F out of the side door, ran into my apartment, and locked all the doors. I don't remember who I called or exactly what happened, but I know I waited until I couldn't hear anyone moving around upstairs anymore and crept back in. Big guy was passed out on the couch. Turns out he was on parole for domestic abuse charges, had gotten super sauced downtown, and made it to the apartment where he used to live. He was honestly so lucky. That could have ended so much worse. Coming in at number 2, babysitting. Before I get into this next story, I just want to say that while this is without a doubt a terrifying experience, our Reddit friends' reaction to the situation is also one of the funnier things I have read. According to GiddyUp_88, this happened when they were in the 6th grade and were babysitting for a new neighbor one night. Quote, all I had to do was sit in the house and do my math homework while she was on a date. Her 2-year-old baby was sleeping in his crib. Around 9 p.m. I get a call and answer. It's some man who only asks, "Who are you?" I say, "I'm the babysitter." Then he starts asking all these questions about where the mom is and who I am personally. I get scared and hang up and call the mom and let her know. The guy calls back and then just starts saying the address I'm at, then asks if the baby is okay. When I say yes he is, he says how can you be so sure when he's that close to a window? To which I just go, I'm just the babysitter and I'm trying really hard on my math homework and now I'm scared and I'm also failing math. Basically, a mental breakdown happened. 5 minutes later, the mom shows up and explains it's her ex-husband who'd found her. She hands me a wad of cash and excuses me. I don't know if the guy was in the bushes or calling from Massachusetts or what. It was scary. I mean, it may as well be straight from a horror movie. I'm just glad they weren't hurt, and I hope that poor mom was able to get away from her crazy stalker ex-husband. And last up today in our number 1 spot, Uncle David. Last up from a now deleted Reddit account is a terrifying story that, had it happened to me as a kid, would have scarred me from being home alone ever again. Quote, I was home alone when I was like 9 or 10. It was literally the second day my mother allowed me to just walk home from school rather than stay at daycare. They go on to say the phone rings and the voice on the other end asks for David, to which they reply, sorry, wrong number. But that's when it got weird. I'm on the line waiting for him to say, oh, I'm sorry. Instead, he starts yelling that he needs to speak to David. He knows David is there. I tell him I have 2 Uncle Davids, but neither are there. From there, things began to escalate for our young Reddit friend, and they explained that the man began screaming and cursing at him before describing his house in perfect detail, right down to the family dog in the backyard. He then concludes the call saying, I know you're lying and I'm gonna come get your ass. Naturally, this terrified the Reddit user beyond belief, so they rushed to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, called their mom, and looked out. At that moment, they heard him banging down and kicking the door, so they ran and hid in the bathroom, as it was the only room that locked in the house, and stayed there until their mom came home. Turns out, the man was looking for their Uncle David, as Uncle David was in some sketchy crowds and owed money to some bad people, and had given this address as his own. Well, that's all I got for you today, my friends. Thanks again for watching. Before you go, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know if you've had any crazy or terrifying Home Alone experiences that rival the ones on this list. See you next time.